Hey guys, my name is Rebelion and it's time for another kicking of the week. Today we're going to be talking about how you can create a nice and full punch, but most importantly, how to make it very snappy. Today I want to show you how I made this punch. And something that stands out to me is just the transient in there. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And I just want to show you how you can create a nice and full punch with some easy layering. So of course, first of all, you need to make your own punch and have a nice character in there for your punch. And I made this punch in Serum, and it was just some easy sound designing in here, using the LFO as a pitching envelope on the oscillators and using some filters with some distortion to create a nice punch. The punch that comes straight out of Serum sounds like this. And it's nice, and it already has those right characteristics that we're going for, but it's just not strong enough. So after I've made the punch in Serum, I of course exported it and put it in my playlist. And in the playlist, I'm just adding some layers to make the punch more full. And what I did first of all is just adding a club kick. And this club kick is in there to just give the punch some more body in the low end and just make it a little bit more full. So we're adding this type of club kick. And when I added it, it didn't really fit, so I was just playing around with the pogo until it completely fit my punch. So just to show you, this was the club kick before I added the pogo. And playing that with the punch, it sounds alright, but just not good enough. And by moving that pogo, it just shifts the phasing a little bit, so it's more in phase, and it just powers the punch in the right way. So after playing around with that pogo, I got this sound. And now that low end is nicely glued into our punch. So in the mixer, I've taken the punch and the club kick, and I've routed that to a bus. And on this bus, I'm just adding some minor EQing and some distortion, and this distortion is just there to gently glue the low end layer and the punch layer a little bit more together. So before our distortion, it sounds like this, and then with that distortion, it just sounds a little bit more unified. And doing these small steps made this layer. This is just a more fat layer for our punch, but we're not there yet. Right now we're going to do the most important step on creating this real nice transient in this punch, because right now it sounds alright, but it just wasn't as transient as we want it to be, so we need to create that transient. And the way that we're going to do that is by using kick 2. And in kick 2 we have this really nice preset over here in pop. It's called Chirpy, and Chirpy is just a nice nice transient type of kick drum. You're already hearing that little click. And now we're going to take Chirpy and we're going to go into the mixer. And first of all, we're going to open up an EQ. But this might seem just a little bit weird and messy. So I'm just going to open up a new EQ and do this whole process all over again, because it's quite easy. And now you're going to understand it a lot better. So I like to make this angle a lot more sharp and just make it more narrow. So we have a narrow peak. And we're just going to find our right tone to boost it. So Chirpy already has this nice click, but we're just going to focus on that, but we're going to make it a little bit more tonally and just have a little bit more body. So we're going to put this at the right spot. For example, this. And if we want, we can give it a little bit more of a resonance with some extra EQ. And you can try dip somewhere. That's all that I'm doing, but over here I just decided to dip it over here. But maybe we don't want to do it this time. After that, we're going to add some distortion. And in this distortion, we're just going to be quite gentle, but we're just adding some more oomph to that transient. And by just playing around a little bit in this distortion, you're already hearing that, that transient that you hear a lot more often in hardstyle kicks nowadays. And when you have this nice transient sound, you can add something like Cashmere's Essentials kick to just add a little bit more transient and just some air if you want to. And this just creates a nice transient sound that we're going to put in our kick. So now I exported the little transient layer, and we're just going to take only the very small beginning of this, and we're just going to layer this in here. And we're just going to put this at maybe a little bit too loud for you, but then we can just change it afterwards. And then by just playing with some pogo just a tiny bit, it just unifies itself into the punch and creates a nice and transient sound. So that's what I did with this small layer over here as well. It's just a little bit of a different tone, but it just fits our punch quite nicely. So when you have your punch layer and it already sounds full, but it just doesn't sound as transient enough, try making yourself a mini transient sound that will just boost the punchiness of your punch. So we're going from this punch, which sounds okay as a character, and we're adding this extra layer, and this extra layer makes it a lot more punchy. Then I just like to add a clap sometimes. Sometimes just a clap can make your punch sound a lot more natural. There's nothing special in here. Maybe some pogo if it's needed, but I didn't even pogo it this time. And putting that into our mixer, we're just putting that quite low underneath our punch and our transient layer. And we're gonna route these three sounds to a buzz. And in this buzz, I'm just boosting a little bit of our resonance. I'm just adding some distortion, which is quite gentle again, just to unify those sounds a little bit better. And I'm just adding some highs afterwards. And that makes our punch sound like this. So we're already going from a lot more empty, characteristic punch to just something that sounds a lot more powerful. Now this gives us this punch layer, and I just felt we kind of lost the power in the lows. So that sometimes just happens when you distort, that you might just lose some clarity in the lows. And I felt I just had to add just another club kick to really finish it off. And it's quite softly in here. So we have our punch layer here and just a soft club kick layer. And of course I pogoed this again to just make it fit perfectly with our punch. Routing these two sounds to another buzz, we're just gonna add a tiny bit of EQ just to make it sound a little bit more prominent in the parts that I want it to sound like. And just adding a tiny bit of compression is gonna finish this off. And with this compression, it's just really important that you take note of the attack. We kind of want to skip that transient part that we created. And after this 13.94 milliseconds, it's gonna kick in with this compression. So what this is gonna do is just gonna keep the transient nice and loud. And after that, it's gonna compress. So adding this little compression layer is gonna change the sound from this to this. And that's just how you can create a nice and full punch. Now I hope you like this and you learned something from this, and hopefully I'll see you back soon again. Cheers!